All right, y'all. Shh. Okay. I'm going to start talking to you about this because tomorrow. All right. So the first thing is, tomorrow is your test, and this is kind of just a review of everything that we have done over the course of this year. And what I always like to tell my students is this: you have worked this whole year super hard. You didn't have to take AP English. You could have taken English 11. You could have taken advanced and done a lot less work, written a lot less papers, all right? But you chose to take this path. And I know that you guys are getting tired and you're ready for school to be out and you're just hashtag over it. But don't give up yet, because you can do this for 3 hours and 15 minutes tomorrow. You can struggle through this tomorrow and get in there and pass this test. Every single one of you has that ability to go in there and really put your mind to it tomorrow, and to remind yourself of all of the things that you've done this year, and to look through your binder and look through your folder and just say, what have I done this year that I can bring back and I can put out on this paper for this test, and I can really, prove to the College Board and to myself that all of the extra work I put in was worth it in the end. Okay? So, I have kids occasionally that are like, I'm done. I just can't do it. There's no more. But you did it for the whole year. Don't waste your money and your time in the ninth hour, so to speak. Okay? So tomorrow you're going to go to the Aux gym to take your test. And I don't know how many of you were in APUSH, because there was a lot. But the protocol for administering this exam is going to be very similar to the one for APUSH, because they are both 3 hours and 15 minutes long, and they both have 2 different forms, which means that the people who sit next to you will have a different test. This is the first time that the College Board has done that for both AP Lang and AP US History. Now, the reason that it took so long to get AP US History passed out is because we have 13 rows of tables in the Aux gym. Table 2 cannot receive tests in the same order as Table 1. Neither can Table 3. So, in addition to having it alternate, every table that's directly behind the table has to be reversed. Okay? So that's why it takes a really long time to pass it out. Mm-hmm. It was just, also your seating chart has to be randomly generated by computer. So it's a whole lot. And then everything has to be passed out individually, person to person, okay? So, and it all has to be documented on sheets with the numbers of your booklets and everything. So it takes a while to get it passed out, because this will be the largest AP test that's administered this year. Is AP Lang. Has huge enrollment. But I think that's because it's actually a really good class that a lot of you use in college, and that the word has kind of gotten out about that. So be mindful of that tomorrow, that it will take some time. What do I want you to do tonight in kind of the ideal situation type thingies? In the ideal situation, you go home, you relax, you sit on your bed or wherever you study, you look through your binder, you look through your folder, you kind of leisurely read through everything, and you fall into a blissful slumber looking forward to the next day. All right? Reality. Some of you will have practice, some of you will work tonight, and some of you are insomniacs, and some of you will go home and go to sleep and wake up in the morning and be like, oh gosh, that's today. But it would make me happy if you would take just a few minutes. I mean, this is not a cram session, okay? This is a skill-based test. We've been practicing these skills all year. But if you would just take a few minutes to look through the items that are in your binder, remind yourself of what we have studied. Pay particularly close attention to your yellow pages, your green sheet of transitions, all right? Pay particularly close attention to some old tests that you have taken and some multiple choice practice that's in there. And don't throw your binder away, and don't burn it in the family fire pit, because every year I get college students emailing me asking if they can have copies of things that were in their binder that they threw away because they did not believe me when I said don't throw it away. So look through all of the things that are in your binder. That's when we keep it, and that's when we keep the binder assignment sheet, because in essence, your binder has created a reference book of materials specific for this class and specific to what I've learned about teaching this class over the course of 11 years, okay? You could all go and buy 5 Steps to a 5 or the Cliff's AP book, but to me, I feel like I've got it streamlined a little bit more with what my students need. Look through your folder at the assignments that you have done this year. Hopefully you realize that the way you've been tested on different books and the way we've done things like that has been ultimately to practice for this test. The dialectical journals, that's rhetorical analysis practice. The claim counterclaim activity from Into the Wild, that's argument practice. All right, the Lost Generation, the American Dream research that you did was synthesis practice. So hopefully you'll realize that. Tomorrow when you come in, I want you to bring some number 2 pencils. You're welcome to take fat pencils with you if that's your jam. They will have some ink pens. Do bring some because I don't know if they're going to have enough. We were running pretty low on APUSH and we have about 50 more kids. Dark blue or black. Wear something comfortable. If you bring some water, that's fine, but it has to stay outside. You cannot have any food or drink in the testing room. Wear something comfortable that's also school appropriate, and do bring a jacket. It is cold in there. I was running around passing out tests, and I still was a little chilly in APUSH, and I will be when I give economics on Friday. But, you know, you're going to want to make sure that you take care of that. And make sure you have breakfast in your belly. All right. So the organization of your test, which you guys already know, but it's always nice to review this, is 3 hours and 15 minutes, just like APUSH. Your multiple choice section is going to be 1 hour long. You will have an essay that is 2 hours and 15 minutes. That's 3 essay questions you will write, 3 essay responses in 2 hours and 15 minutes. The 15 minutes is going to be announced to you as reading time, but you can write during that time, and it does not matter which essay you choose to write first. It is in your best interest to write something for every single essay that demonstrates that you understand what you're being asked to do. That is going to ensure that you get the highest amount of credit possible. If you wrote something for all of them rather than you just wrote one, you're going to score higher overall. All right, and so it's kind of a numbers game that way. The first section on the test, of course, is multiple choice. The multiple choice section is 45% of your overall score, and it is 1 hour in length. Okay, the best strategies that I have are to look at how many passages you were given and divide that into your time, giving yourself equal time on each passage. You will have both pre-20th century and post-20th century prose passages. You'll have around 55 questions. Sometimes you have 1 or 2 more, sometimes 1 or 2 less. It's important for you to remember that your passages are reproduced on every facing page. So you do not have to flip pages back and forth on the multiple choice, which is a lovely thing that they do. But if you have annotated it at the beginning, you may still want to flip back to your original. Some types of questions you're going to see. Straightforward. This is the one that always messes me up because I'm always like, oh, that's too obvious. No, and I second guess myself. If you have a question that refers you to specific lines, stay on those lines. Your answer may change as you read further in the passage, but if it's referenced you to specific lines, that's where the answer is going to be. The all except question, which generally is going to take a little bit more time. The question that asks you to make an inference, something that's not directly stated that you have to figure out based on what they have given you. Haven't seen the Roman numeral question in a while, so I'm pretty sure they have phased it out like they said they were going to. I hope. They give you like 3 choices, and your answer choices are combinations of those. Yeah. So it's hard. It's really hard, and it takes a lot of time. But I haven't seen it in about 4 or 5 years. So, yeah. And then the footnote question. If you have a passage that has footnotes, there's going to be answers that you find in the footnotes. 2 years ago, they asked a question, what does ETAL mean? Et al. And we talked about this at the beginning of the year, but we had not revisited, but it means and others in MLA citations. And if the people who did go back and read through all the stuff in their binder, they got it. And the people who didn't were like, nope, I didn't remember that. So, do take a moment just to look through that stuff in your binder. Look at stuff about MLA citations. There's going to be some things that you may see on the test regarding that. Did I go backwards? Yeah, I did. All right, so some specific techniques that you guys can use is, of course, process of elimination. Fill in the blank. You can use your context clues. You can anticipate, and sometimes you just have to make an educated guess. All right, you're going to have questions about rhetoric, questions about what do you think the author's purpose is, what do you think the author means in a specific area, questions about the main idea, questions about organization and structure, and then questions about rhetorical modes. And a lot of times the questions about rhetorical modes deal with like an argument form, like presenting the problem, defining the problem, presenting solutions, analyzing the solutions and looking for a call to action. So they may ask you some things about that. So, just be mindful that these are things we've talked about. We did those purpose summary graphic organizers over the course of the year to help you with questions like this, okay? When you're writing this purpose for paragraphs, you're figuring out these things. So some approaches you can take to the multiple choice. My favorite approach that's my kind of foolproof go-to is that I read the question and then I mentally produce the answer. And then I check the answer against possible answer choices, and I pick the one that it most closely resembles. All right? That is very helpful to me. Also, answer the easiest questions immediately. There will be a couple per passage that are pretty straightforward and simple. And then on the more difficult ones, write in your book. Mark down eliminated choices. Use your context clues to define terms that are unfamiliar. Okay? And if you're really unsure, go back after you've answered some of the later questions because they might give you some insight into some of the previous ones that you were stumped upon. So make a mark in your book. And remember, guess, no penalty. If they come up and they're like, you have 10 minutes remaining and you have 50 to answer, bubble them all in with the same letter and then use your remaining time to go and answer some of those. All right? But pick a letter of the day, just like on ACT, because it's going to raise your percentage chances. All right, if I get a passage that's really, really difficult, generally it's going to be a pre-20th century passage. I like to read the passage really quickly and get the main idea and then read it again and annotate important points, okay? So that really helps me just kind of understand what's going on. And I also try to pay attention to tone because you never know if you're going to get a passage that's meant to be satire, but you didn't catch it at the first glance. So pay attention to tone and words that are indicative of tone markers. All right. Some people like to look at the first lines of each passage and then tackle the easiest passages first. This would stress me out to the max because I would be worried the entire time in the back of my head that I was going to get off-numbered or askew or something, and I would just really be sweating it. So, this may not be the strategy for you, but some people do like to work this way. All right, so the second essay that you guys are going to write, or the second essay that's presented to you, is actually the rhetorical analysis. And what the College Board is looking to see that you can do is that you can analyze how another author organizes his or her writing in the terms of structure, purpose, and style. How did they organize it? Why did they write it? And what stylistic devices did they use to accomplish their purpose, or his or her purpose? So some sample analysis questions that you may see. Analyze an author's view on a subject. Analyze rhetorical devices used by an author to achieve his or her purpose. Analyze stylistic elements in a passage and their effects. Analyze the author's tone and how the author conveys that tone. Compare and or contrast two passages, which I haven't seen in quite some time, and I would be kind of surprised if y'all had that tomorrow. But you're prepared because we did practice compare-contrast analysis. Analyze the author's purpose and how he or she achieves it, which is the most common thing they're going to ask you to do. Why did so-and-so write this? What is his position on so-and-so? How does this person use rhetorical or stylistic devices to achieve this purpose? Okay. How an author recreates a real or imagined experience. Can't say I've really seen much of that ever. How they present him or herself, and then what do you believe the intended effect of this passage is? Okay, in terms of structure, you may see essays organized like this: example, comparison, contrast, definition, cause and effect, process analysis, and classification. And we have read essays that are all structured this way. In terms of stylistic devices, you can always analyze logos, ethos, and pathos as far as rhetorical modes and tools. Remember, look at your vocabulary list from the first of the year because it's not just, oh, this is a logos appeal. You have to explain how it is a logos appeal. You might say this is an appeal to logic because the author references the statistic. All right, but there is a list of how we make logos, ethos, and pathos appeals in your binder twice because I've recreated it and gave it back to you again. All right, so I want you to look over that. You can look at nonsense terms. You can look at some figurative language like symbols and metaphors and things like that. But don't forget, these things right here are stylistic devices. And if you look at your yellow pages, it goes over exactly what you need to do to analyze these. All right, and that's really all that's necessary for you to analyze to get a top tier score. All right, so maintaining consistency is important using connective tissue. Make sure that your subject is consistent, that if you start with a singular subject, that you maintain that. Make sure you're writing an active voice and that you use pacing and sentence variety. And if you finish a little early, go back and check for the ABC rule. Plan to spend the first 3 minutes reading and deconstructing the question or the prompt. Then you're going to circle or underline the essential terms and elements in the prompt. And then if the prompt requires more than one element, you have to use more than one element. Okay? So read the prompt, figure out exactly what it's asking you, and then make sure that you're taking care of that. Then you're going to read the passage and you're going to absorb the main idea. And then you're going to go back and annotate it in terms of how you're going to respond to the prompt. And it's best to make some sort of like outline, claim data warrant outline, and check it off as you go, because a lot of times you'll have really good ideas at the beginning, but you'll get stressed out while you're writing and you'll forget those ideas. But if you spend just a few minutes on the front end organizing your essay, then you kind of create a checklist that you can go back and check off at the end, and it makes it a lot easier. All right? So I always say, just do a rough outline in your booklet. You can write all in there. You know, you can even circle and write things out next to the passage and kind of like code them with symbols to where you want to put them in your essay. But some pre-writing, definitely, it will help you. All right? So again, review the prompt and list the elements that need to be included in your introduction. What do you use to remind you what to keep in the introduction? Soaps. Thank you. Draw a graphic organizer and fill it out for the body. And then after you complete this, composition will be a breeze. Don't worry about, if you can't come up with something catchy to open up the essay, that's okay. Get to the point. Get, layout. So-and-so writes about such and such, and his essay titled blah, 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 which was published da-da-da, and his purpose is such. And then go for it. They are checking to make sure that you understand the prompt and that you analyze it adequately. And then after you write, go back and check your list and make sure you've included all of those things. You can always add another paragraph or something if you have time later, and you can put an asterisk in there, and the people who are reading it understand that this is a first draft, and they will find it and put it in their own order. That is okay. It does not matter if it's messy. Trust me. All right? Avoid paraphrasing. Weak writers paraphrase, strong writers analyze. Use textual evidence and actually analyze the textual evidence, making sure that you use quotation marks and that you put your periods and commas inside of the quotation marks. You're going to use connective tissue and transition words. Use a variety of sentence structure. And if you have time, think about the ABC rule. Think when you're looking at a passage, and if I'm reading a rhetorical analysis response from my classes, and if the author's name is Smith, then probably 85% of the class's first word of their essay is going to be Smith. All right, because it's easy to start by mentioning the author. And if it's not Smith, the first word is in his essay or in his speech. So, think about it. How could you create some variety there without taking too much of your time? Just something to think about. Use your terms thoughtfully. Do not go in there on your test and write the author used diction, because that makes me cringe and it hurts me. It hurts me. Because, of course, he uses diction. Diction's word choice. What kind of diction? That's why we have a whole list of words to describe it. Cool? All right, so after synthesis is argument, and after rhetorical analysis is argument. And really, the synthesis essay and the argument essay are both argument essays. The only difference is that you're backing up your argument on the synthesis essay with the sources that they have provided you with. In the argument essay, you're understanding the nature of the position taken in the prompt, and you're taking a stance, and you're clearly and logically supporting your claim. Teenagers do a pretty good job on the argument. The argument has kind of morphed in the last 6 years. It used to be where you could look at it and say, oh, I agree with this or I disagree with this. But now a lot of the times you're going to have to take a position, like create a position that's independent, and that's okay. That's fine. But you're going to have to come up with your own very specific evidence, and you're going to make sure that you get your ideas down clearly. So you're going to ask yourself, do I feel the same? And if you do, you agree. Do I think this person is totally wrong? Then you disagree. Or do you want to come in there with your own position, or do you want to create a qualification? Totally up to you there. All right, some examples of good evidence for you to use in your response. Facts, statistics, details, quotations, dialogue, needed definitions, recognition of the opposition, examples, anecdotes, contrasts and comparisons, cause and effect, and appeal to authority. And of course, we have our tried and true method, H places, and we also have $see it that you can look at too. Both of those are really good methods to help you if you're thinking, I am having a terrible time coming up with evidence. Brainstorming is super important here. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it's like a little story that illustrates a point. Okay, so when you're doing the argument, read, think, take some time to decide your position, and you may not choose the thing that you feel the most passionate about. Sometimes it's easier to argue against yourself, in all honesty. Sometimes I may not inside myself feel one way, but I can come up with more evidence to support it, and so I could write the better paper. And that's just, happens. Draw a grid for claim data warrant. Create a strong claim. Don't forget to consider the opposition. All right, considering the opposition is very important. If you leave them out, you will not get a top-tiered score. All right, then you're going to have your synthesis essay, which is basically an argument essay expanded, that works out a little bit more. All right, so in the synthesis essay, the College Board is looking to see that you can read critically, that you can understand and analyze texts, and that you can develop and support a position on a given topic. You're going to have to support that position not only with evidence from outside sources, but with evidence from your own learning, reading, and experiences. And then you're going to back that up, which is why I call the outside sources they provide you backing with those sources. And you're going to have to cite the sources used. How do they want you to cite the sources they give you? Exactly. Source A, source B, source C. If you're a reader and you're grading 1,000 of these, it's much easier to score a paper when it is written out as source A, etc., than having to find the name. All right. You may defend the position they give you. You may refute it. You may argue for compromise. You may come up with your own position. All right. The most important advice I can give you on writing a synthesis essay is to determine your position after you read the prompt before you read the sources. Is to come up with your own evidence from H places or $see it before you read the sources and jot it down. And then it's to look at the sources and see which ones support you, your evidence, and your position. If you go directly to the sources and start reading the sources before you come up with your position, you will fall into the trap of summarizing the sources and not taking a strong argumentative stance on the subject, and that will not get you a 5 or higher. All right? So you're going to get 6 or 7 documents. They're all very short. They're all nonfiction. At least one is going to be a visual, non-textual source like a chart, a political cartoon, a table. Don't shy away from using the visual because you will automatically have to analyze it by referencing it. All right? Whereas in a piece of text, you can just copy a quote and drop it in there. Don't do that, but a lot of times people do. But you automatically have to provide some analysis here. The print is black and white, okay, so you have to ask yourself, what might this have looked like if it had previously been printed in color? And all of the sources presenting different viewpoints, and they're asking you to join into the conversation and talk to them about what's going on with these sources. Okay, remember, you need to create your own thesis because that shows that you are independent. You're going to choose your view, and you're going to use your sources to support that. Weaker writers paraphrase the information they are given instead of analyzing it. You have to use at least 3 sources, which will generally be indicated in the prompt. They're going to give you a number of sources to use. You have to use those sources or you will be marked down as a non-pass level score for not following directions. You have to attribute them. And remember that the best writers create a dialectic that offers complexity. They're not just saying, this is my way or the highway. All right, they're saying, I support this position because da 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 da, while I recognize that someone else might think that their position is better because my position is still better, dot dot dot. Word? Some things that I'm worried about. I'm really worried about comma splices. Because when I've been grading y'all's papers lately, I'm seeing tons of comma splices, tons of sentence fragments. All right. If your sentence does not have a subject and a verb and it does not make sense, it is not a sentence. It is a fragment. All right. A subordinate clause is a fragment. It's a subordinate clause. It's not a sentence. 2 sentences joined by only a comma is a comma splice. Those are not good mistakes. Enough of those, it's going to affect your score. All right. High school writers should not be making those mistakes. Avoid personal pronouns. Use strong examples. Maintain consistency in your examples. Avoid contractions. Use every single second of your time. Take a few moments to pre-write. And remember, you got this. You've been practicing it all year, and you can go in there and you can just knock it out. Do any of you have any specific questions that I could hopefully address? Yes, ma'am.